Sorry about the lighting in here. It's kind of fuzzy. Um, I wanted good lighting because the lamp that I use for facial lighting sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. It's almost nighttime where I'm at, and so it's difficult to get good lighting in a room, especially when the nearest light is right above the television over there, and the other nearest light is back behind me, which you can see. And the only other light that I have in this room for the trifecta effect is the lamp above. This is my outline for the video. And I would like to thank you for joining your host, Lego Brat, in a very special Star Wars-esque video. I have decided to do outlines for what I want to discuss in the video for my live streams like this. And then if I'm doing gameplay footage, what I want to talk about in each video. So since this one is going to be a long video, and it is one of those videos that I can't necessarily get done in 30 or so minutes. It's one of those things that I want to get done within 30 minutes, but it may not happen. So this one is about fandom, and more specifically, my Star Wars fandom from when I was growing up, and how it translates to me as an adult now. It is difficult for Star Wars fans in general to be happy because, especially when a new movie rolls around. It's difficult to be happy for the new movie a couple months in after you had just seen it once or twice. It's very difficult to adjust to various Star Wars lore and what they're trying to show you in the movies. By the way, I get no kickback from this, but I love IBC root beer, so if you see me taking a swig from a bottle, it's IBC cream soda or root beer, because right now I have nothing else in the house to drink other than water. If my throat gets dry, I drink whatever I got at hand. So this video is brought to you by IBC. IBC, if you're listening, I love your soda. Please, if you want me to do a video on it, let me know. I would love to work with you guys. But first of all, I'm going to talk about my history on where the Star Wars fandom in my family really stirred up, and then how I became involved at a young age doing watching Star Wars, enjoying Star Wars, and basically where it went from there. So, the year is, when was the first Star Wars? 1977 or 78? 1978. My dad, in college, goes with 3 of his friends, goes to see the original Star Wars. He tells me the story of how he saw Star Wars and how he was blown away as a young adult on what was capable at that time. At that time, the most technologically advanced movies were 007, Star Wars, and Indiana Jones. Indiana Jones came out a year or two after the original Star Wars, A New Hope. And it revolutionized the way movies were made. Every single movie afterwards was revolutionized in a way to make better graphics, better technologically improvements based off of what Lucasfilm and ILM, which is Lucas's sub-partner, have been able to accomplish in the past 30 years. So, my first view in the Star Wars lore and everything wasn't VHS, wasn't DVD, wasn't Blu-ray. I saw it when I was 5 at 1990, summer or fall of 1995, maybe 1996. I had just started kindergarten or pre-K, and we had to drive all the way back to where our house was. And my parents wanted to surprise me. They had just picked me up from my grandparents' place in Southlake, Texas. We had to go up to Louisville, which, if you don't know where Louisville is, it's right off of I-35, north of Dallas. We were on our way home, and Mom said, son, there's something we would like to share with you, since you will probably never get the chance to see another movie like this in theaters. And so they take me in. See, my first experience with the Star Wars original trilogy was seeing the remastered edition of A New Hope. The one with Jabba, Han Solo stepping on Jabba's tail and everything. And I thought it was a great movie. So, the way that my history started with Star Wars was very humble. I saw the Star Wars movies. I fell in love with the Star Wars movies. My parents bought me the original trilogy one last time before the remasters were released that very Christmas. I got a couple of action figures. I got the Darth Vader TIE Fighter with Darth Vader figurine that can sit down if you remove its cape. Because the cape was a big plastic wavy thing that just attached to the back of Darth Vader. There were no cloth elements in a lot of the Hasbro toys at that time period. The only cloth elements that you would get... Sorry, had to tighten up my shoe. It's bugging me. Actually, I'll just take off my shoes. I'm inside the house. I don't see why I did that. Anyways. Whoa. See what I mean about the light? Very faulty. So I fell in love with Star Wars so much. My parents, for the next 3 or 4 Christmases, would give me at least one new Star Wars toy. Maybe, 1995 was when, or 1996 was when a lot of the Star Wars games for PC came out because, as a collector's edition, because Windows 95 made it very, very easy for it to run. Any Windows prior made it a little bit difficult to run those types of games. You had Microsoft 1995 and 1998. 1998, of course, 1995 came out in 2004. 1994. And 1998 came out in 2007. It was a 2-year release launch period after that. And 2005 and 2008, or 1995 and 98, were the two biggest things for increasing the spectrum of gaming in general on the PC. And it increased the specifications on what could be included in a game. You didn't have to just play DOS-box games and all that sort of stuff. It also, the differences between 95 and 98 were 95 you had to use dial-up, whereas 98 you could use either dial-up or just your regular wired internet connection without a modem, because the modem was traditionally inside the computer at that time period. You didn't have to use an external modem to connect to a phone jack or whatever. The reason why I went into that was the Star Wars games I had as growing up as a kid were all PC based or Game Boy Color based. I didn't have any of the Star Wars games for Super Nintendo. My friends in elementary school, when I moved to DFW, when I went from Catholic school to public school, they all had the Star Wars games for Super Nintendo. So I would go over their houses and play the games. That's part of the reason why I started off my remake of the Super Nintendo collection with the Star Wars games. They were so fun to play back then, and I was a whole hell of a lot better at them back then too, because all the Star Wars games are memorization of the level, where the enemies spawn up. You go back, they respawn where you just killed them. It's all memorization on how the levels play. And I loved Star Wars so much that I would do role play, creating my own Star Wars vehicles before there were Star Wars Lego sets. I had quite an extensive Lego set toy collection, even as a kid, because that was my main medium. I either read a book, I either played PC games, or I was playing with Legos, being creative with what I had. And every year, new things came out. So in 1999, when The Phantom Menace was released, Lego signed up a deal with George Lucas to start manufacturing Lego sets. Now, when George Lucas signed up to allow Lego to build Lego sets based off the Star Wars franchise, he said, "Yeah, it's good to do a couple of sets from the first trilogy, but I'm going to let y'all see the movie prior to everybody else in the secret screening so that you can get ideas for sets to release with this upcoming movie while still releasing sets for the older movies as well." And George and Lego had a very unique relationship. And George and the fan base had a very unique relationship. I remember going on to StarWars.com and being able, in the 90s and early 2000s, George, every revision that he did to the script, so like if he made a major change to the script, he would put the old script on StarWars.com for fans to download and read up. It was not what, and that's where all the speculation videos started coming in from Star Wars fans when YouTube was born, because we all saw previous iterations of the script. We were all assuming that it was going to be exactly like that. George Lucas, I'm going to say that for A New Hope, he had probably 25 or 30 scripts, and I believe I was able to download at least 3 of them in the 90s, and so on and so forth. But like I said, I like reading the scripts of movies when the creators of the scripts make changes and stuff. I love that. I love being able to get a virtual copy of something before I even see it in theaters. Of course, when I was getting the free scripts off of StarWars.com, they weren't the actual scripts for the movies, but it made me excited for the movies. You know, Disney as a whole is very secretive about how their movies are made and everything, what goes into them. George Lucas, he built this movie franchise for us, the fans. And the reason why he did it in 20-year iterations is because the fans were always craving that next Star Wars book, that next Star Wars movie, that next Star Wars action figure, that next Star Wars toy, that next Star Wars collectible that was going to come out this year or the year after or whatever. Even when I go to my local retro gaming store, my local used Lego store, I see all these old Kenner Star Wars toys, completely sealed. I see all these old 1990s, 1980s Star Wars toys and vehicles completely sealed that you could lose yourself. I see all the comics sealed and protected for Star Wars. I see all these different things that are at my local game stores, comic shops, toy stores. I can see all of it, I have to admit, it is very wonderful to be a fan of something that is larger than life itself, you know. But at the same time, when fans are too vocal, like ever since the start of YouTube, fans have started becoming more and more vocal because there's more ways to reach out. You can go onto Facebook, you can go onto Twitter, you can go onto YouTube, make a video, record a video, and say, hey, I hated this movie, I respect the vision that it was, but in the end, you still have to be respectful of the creator. The reason why George Lucas sold Star Wars to Disney is more of a fact that the fan base wasn't appreciative of his vision. Yes, we know that when George Lucas writes his scripts and writes his storylines, he doesn't know how the dialogue should sound in a Star Wars film. A lot of the best lines and most remembered lines in Star Wars film history are improvised because George Lucas is not very good at creating that dialogue in the movie. The reason why fans liked the prequels to start off with and then started to despise it years later is because even though George Lucas took the suggestions into account, he didn't want 10 plus reshoots of every scene, because even though the dialogue sucked, he had his vision in mind, and the way that his vision was in mind was to effectively show that it is a progressional story towards that middle arc that he started 20 years previously. He has said 10 to 20 plus times in interviews, yeah, Star Wars is basically a story for a 10-year-old boy. It is a story of action, adventure, love, kindness, family. It's all there, all in this action figure or action movie in a galaxy far, far away. It is not difficult to imagine a world without. It is very difficult to imagine a world without Star Wars and its fan base. If you look at all the various conventions, if Star Wars hadn't become so popular, Gundam Wing and Space Fighter genre anime might not have become so popular in the current genre of anime, and even in the 90s and 80s, it was not well known that there were those types of genres out there until after Star Wars, where people started picking up those types of space adventures to try and get their Star Wars fandom fix in an animated form. There are so many spin-offs. There are the Muppet spin-offs. There are the That 70s Show spin-off, which is basically a show about the 70s and 80s. It doesn't necessarily, because Star Wars came out in late 70s and went throughout 1989. It was a big franchise. So you're talking about 20 years that it spanned, and then he waited 10 to 15 years and then released the next set. But back to my point. The reason why fandom is so popularized in the Star Wars and not so much in in the Star Trek type of scene is, yes, Star Trek had some great action scenes. Star Trek had some great action scenes. Star Wars had some great space battles. Star Wars had really really good costumes for the characters that were played for it. But it didn't have that dynamic governmental type feel where people were trying to overthrow evil, in a sense, because in Star Trek you had three main enemies. You had the Borg, you had the main enemy. I don't remember his name, and that was in three of the Star Trek movies. They could never apparently defeat any of the three enemies for very long. They could back them off. They could take out dozens of the enemies, but they would always come back in the next episode or in a couple future episodes, and they could never fully defeat the enemy. Whereas Star Wars, it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. The middle we were shown. They defeated and drove away the Empire at the end of Return of the Jedi. They destroyed the Emperor, the main tyrannical leader of the Empire, and caused the Empire to go into disarray. And that is where you start to see why the Empire now rules unknown space, while the Galactic Republic owns all of the space that is in between, that is in normal space. Well, what in Star Wars canon we consider normal space. Meaning the main galaxy, its bands, all the planets that the Empire had conquered over the years now belong to the New Republic, whereas the Empire itself broke off into smaller factions, went into deep space, which had been relatively unexplored. The furthest planet in the canonization of Star Wars: The Force Awakens was that Jakku was the last remaining military base in the outer regions that had to be conquered before the Rebel Alliance had won complete and total victory of the battle against the Empire and drove them away completely until they came back with Starkiller Base. But another reason why fandoms should not be so vocal, or if they are too vocal, that they should be talking in a mannerism that reflects their thoughts and not necessarily what they were expecting. Because, with George, you could look at all of the scripts that he wrote. You could see what's similar and different to each thing. You could even predict, but in the long run, only George knew what was going to happen in the movies. Only George knew what could and could not happen at any given moment. And that is the thing that fans need to understand. Even though fandom in itself has its own stories, you can collect the books, you can collect the movies, you can collect the video games, you can collect everything that tells the history of Star Wars. But at the same time, you've got to have that grounded in the reality of you live in the real world, you love this film franchise a lot. Even if you don't disagree with something, at least take it to the point where it doesn't overwhelm the creator to sell his company and to basically make a deal with the devil. Because Star Wars was worth way more than what George Lucas sold it for. George Lucas sold it for $8 billion. He didn't want to do any more movies because of the fan base's reactions and how mean and cruel that they were to the fan base in or to him, the fan base being to him, every time he stepped out of his front door, every time he went into a public conversation, they said, the news outlets would say, when is there going to be a new Star Wars film? He says, I have no comments for that. The fans didn't like my prequel trilogy, then they probably won't like my new one, even if I desired to create it. So, no, there's not going to be any more Star Wars films. And fans, when they heard that, started outcrying for George to make a Star Wars film. Well, he had the stories written for Star Wars. 7, 8, and 9. But the thing is he wasn't going to make them because of all the crap. Imagine making your masterpiece, your first 6 parts, and getting crap for 10 to 12 years on the prequel trilogy that explains the backstory for the original trilogy that fans loved and adored for almost 50 plus years, and they still adore the original trilogy. There's no doubting that. But you take the original trilogy and you understand that if somebody just saw the original trilogy or saw the newer trilogy without seeing the original trilogy and seeing what happened to those characters and why they are as they are today, you would not get the full feel of Star Wars the way Disney's doing it. I'm not saying that Disney's a bad company for manufacturing Star Wars films. I'm just saying they're relying on fans that have been fans their entire lives to become directors and actors to flush out the Star Wars universe so that because George Lucas didn't want to do it. In fact, George Lucas said, hey, I'd like to do episode 7 to start up the base, and Disney's like, no, you can't. You signed this contract. We have all rights to the movies. We have rights to the scripts. We write our own scripts. We do everything. I at least want to do my first movie to appease the fan base and show that we are cooperating together. And Disney's like, no, I'm sorry, you can't do that. In fact, the reason why Battlefront 3, even though it was 99% developed, it was 99% complete, and it was never released, is because when Disney bought the Star Wars franchise, they said to George, anything that Lucasfilm is working on for any Star Wars games or anything, those games will no longer be worked on. Disney now controls the entire Star Wars canon. Every single book that is not based on the Star Wars film is no longer canon. We're going to start fresh, we're going to complete your 9-part trilogy, and we're going to show our version of canon, not yours, George. But in order for us to do that, I will have you sign your paper. You have no say in the movies. Yeah, your pleas to keep everybody that works for your company is very valid. We will keep all your company's workers insured and employed, and with lots of movies to come. We will allow you early viewing rights should you desire to see the movies prior to being released and tell us what you think. Should our contract remain temporary, and you get $80 billion Plus, you get 50% of the marketing rights for all the toys and stuff, just like you had with all your toy assets that you had made contracts with over the years. 50. So you have to imagine it like this. So when George signed, it sounded like a great deal to him. He was agreed to have his last 3-part trilogy. Kathleen Kennedy said that she would try her best. Now, best being the correct word, to stay in the art of George Lucas's vision of the overall trilogy, which when Disney executives were given the paperwork and the scripts and everything, they said, "This is crap. Throw it on the floor." And then when they did 52 paper pickup, burnt the scripts that George Lucas gave them, which is why we have the crappy films we have right now for Star Wars: The Force Awakens and Star Wars: Last Jedi. Very overpowered political machines. Now, George Lucas's films were always at least semi-political for the times, but at the same time, they weren't blasted in your face. Oh, we need animal protection rights, because it wasn't blatantly tossed in your face. Oh, this is what Disney's about nowadays. We need animal protection rights so that we can keep doing movies and keep lobbying in Congress. It wasn't like that when George Lucas did it. Yes, he showed political commentary on the politics of the United States at the time, his vision of what the United States was doing at the time, in his movies, because the prequels, unlike what is done today, was very politicalized. It showed how Anakin was the chosen one. It showed who he had as friends on the political side of things. He was always friends with Palpatine. He could tell Palpatine his deepest, darkest secrets and not get in trouble with the Jedi Order. Palpatine was the guy he could go to, and Palpatine was ultimately the reason why he was downfall to a Sith Order type thing. And even then, he didn't fully devote himself to the Sith. He wanted to learn the power that he needed to save his wife's life. In the end, because he gave in to the dark side and obeyed Emperor Palpatine's commands, he ended up killing his wife anyway, because he got angry because he thought that the Jedi Order was holding him back. You saw it in Episode 2 and Episode 3 that he believed the Jedi Order was holding him back from the knowledge he needed to save his wife, because only the only people allowed in the restricted sections of the library, which includes the Sith Order, knowledge on how to save people from dying, would be Jedi Masters on the Jedi Council and people that are in the Jedi Council that are considered Masters. Now, because the Jedi Council allowed him to be on the allowed Anakin to be on the Jedi Council, but did not grant him the rank of Master, even though he was more powerful than any other Jedi that had ever lived, he could not research what he needed to learn, what he needed to learn in order to save his wife's life from death without having to turn to Palpatine, without having to turn to the dark side. If they hadn't have given him the assignment of spying on Palpatine, he would have never even learned that there was that knowledge and that there was people who could teach him that knowledge without having to resort to the forbidden section of the Jedi Order. It was the only methodology that he could rationalize that he could save his wife. In fact, all it showed in his Force vision was that his wife was in pain. It did not show that he was going to die, that she was going to die. He automatically assumed that based off of previous experience with his mother, that she was going to die in childbirth. Assumptions are not valid fact. And because he assumed that his wife was going to die in childbirth, he started trying to learn as much as he could to save his wife. In the end, distancing himself from her and his ideals in the Jedi Order, and distancing himself from Padme's love, to where when Obi-Wan showed up on Mustafar to confront Anakin, he force choked his wife until she was unconscious. Didn't necessarily kill her, but it was the main cause of her death. She was force choked enough to where she lost consciousness, to where they had to operate to save the babies, to where she had lost a little live because her husband openly attacked her. She could not take care of her kids. Her kids were forced childbirth. And in the end, Darth Vader, when he screamed out in that last scene in Revenge of the Sith, he screamed out all the pain and anguish that he had felt in his heart, how he had betrayed his only love, how he had betrayed what he thought was right, why he did what he thought was right for himself and for his wife, that she turned on him. He thought his wife was dead. He thought his two children, he thought he was only having one child. He didn't know he was having twins. Only Obi-Wan and Yoda knew that he had twins. But his children were dead. It took him 14 weeks to be in a fully functional suit. He missed his wife's funeral on Naboo. He missed so much in that 14 weeks that he was in the repair chambers on Coruscant to get his body fixed, that he feels regret for it all. He doesn't feel like he can be forgiven for that. And the way you need to look at the prequels is it lines up what is supposed to happen in the middle three films. In the middle three films, we see Luke reveal Darth Vader's face and why he needed that redemption in order to start the new Jedi Order. He needed to redeem his father so that he could become a Force Ghost and teach him everything that needed to be learned by the Force Ghost Jedi Council in order to gain the knowledge to build his own first Jedi Order. Technically it's the third or fourth iteration of the Jedi Order, because the first Jedi Order was on the Outer Regions. Then when the Jedi Order outcast dark side users and wanted to become a light side organization, they moved closer to the inner regions. And then that was the second Jedi Order. Then the third Jedi Order was after the Great Jedi and Sith War in the very old Republic, probably a long, long time before they said the Sith had been extinct for thousands of millennia. That was way before Yoda's time. That was way before a lot of the times that are more recent in Star Wars history, like the Phantom Menace through Return of the Jedi. that Jedi Order was the third Jedi Order was toppled down by the Sith Order and the start of the Empire by Anakin Skywalker, aka Darth Vader, and so you're on to the fifth Jedi Order that once again is destroyed by the Sith, and it is Luke's job in this new trilogy to train Rey well enough to where she can be an even match against the dark side, and hopefully he comes back as a Force Ghost in Episode 9, because Rey still needs his guidance to either save or defeat Kylo Ren and save the Jedi Order from extinction and destroy the Sith Order and find balance in light and dark. And that is something that has to be learned again by the Jedi Order. That is why the ancient Jedi texts were such an important plot in the Last Jedi movie. The Canto Bight scenes, yeah, I can see why they were there. From a movie standpoint, they wanted to show why. They wanted to show Finn's point of view in doing Poe's plan and why they needed to do Poe's plan compared to the idea of why they had come up with this plan, because they didn't trust the secondary leader that was just thrown in there, that apparently wasn't on any registered troop list or commander list or whatever, and that is why they were so defiant, because they thought that this person that was put in charge, Admiral Holdo, wasn't the leader that needed to be there, as she was called in from another mission to help guide the Republic, the New Republic's fleet, or the New Republic's resistance fleet, to safety. And she didn't agree, or Poe didn't agree with her commands and wanted his mission to succeed, so that's why the entire Canto Bight scene was. And to me, the Canto Bight scene was a waste of 50 plus minutes in the movie. That movie is 3 hours long. Every other Star Wars movie's 2 hours and 30 minutes, or 2 hours and 40 minutes or less. That movie that was for The Last Jedi was the same amount of time as one of the Lord of the Rings films. And I can't watch the Lord of the Rings films without having to go to the restroom at least 3 times and having to pause the movie 3 times. I'm sorry. It had a lot of things that I'm sure made sense in the book, but didn't make sense in the overall aspect of the movie. The way that the book's laid out, it's laid out similar to The Lord of the Rings, in the fact that you have the beginning, you have race training, and then you have the escape from the First Order fleet, the escape from their original military base. Then you have then as they're escaping, the three come up with the plan to go to Canto Bight and get the Imperial codes to shut down their detection array to allow them safe passage through the hyperspace. And then you have almost 2 or 3 chapters of the book are Canto Bight, whereas there's 40-something chapters in the Star Wars Last Jedi book. 2 or 3 chapters out of 40-something chapters is not a big enough plot point to include 50 to 80 minutes in an entire movie. It's just not. Yes, you could include the imprisonment scene and the escape scene, but you didn't have to include a 15-minute overview of all the gambling casinos and all the creatures on Canto Bight that needed to be rescued and spared from imprisonment. And you didn't have to have it take 15 minutes for them to get imprisoned, and then 10 minutes for them to get out, and then a whole 30-minute chase scene where the police are trying to recapture them again, and then they escape on a stolen Imperial cruiser where they get the codes, and then they didn't have to have the scene where they go back on the Supremacy, the guy betrays them, and then they get freed by the same guy, and 20 minutes later, it was just too much to take in the first time. Now, I understand that if you saw the movie more than once, you could understand a little bit better where they were coming from in those scenes. But from a guy that sees movies that I enjoy more than once, I didn't enjoy the Star Wars film for The Last Jedi enough to see it more than once in theaters. I was going to see it at the $2 show when it came to the $2 show at the movie theater near me. But, alas, the movie's no longer showing at the $2 show. I haven't seen it a second time. It's released later on this week. And at this point, it's a movie that, yes, I want it for my Star Wars collection. Will I ever watch it again? Who knows? But that is why fans being too vocal can be the worst thing for a movie franchise. George Lucas said that there was going to be a 9-part series. Mark Hamill said that there was going to be a 9-part series in one of his interviews. George Lucas said that it was initially going to be a 9-part series. We got 6 parts, and then the fan base spoke out in hatred and rage for 10 years, made George Lucas not want to return back to his day job and do Star Wars films or Indiana Jones films or any of that because of all the crap he was getting. He did one more Indiana Jones film. People complained about that. The fans of Indiana Jones complained about that movie. I thought it was a good movie for the time. It was very truthful to the legend of the Crystal Skull. Was it a little bit too much to have an alien spacecraft escape at the end of the film? Yeah, especially if it's coming from the City of Gold. But, if you have Steven Spielberg and George Lucas working on it, Steven Spielberg is the classic alien fanatic. He's the classic guy that you would go to for the classic alien gray look. That's probably where George Lucas got the idea to have an alien spacecraft in the middle of the City of Gold to return the Crystal Skull to, because it was very truthful to the legend of the Crystal Skull. 13 skulls create a supercomputer that grants knowledge to masses, the great masses of the world. The legend of the Crystal Skull represents all the quests you have to go through to gain the knowledge you seek. Just like the truth and the fact that there are many mysteries in the earth that we don't understand. There are many mysteries in the Star Wars franchise that we don't understand. And that if we pretend to know all the mysteries that have been revealed to us and come across as an asshole, come across as a jerk because we make fan speculations on how the new movie is going to be based off the trailer or everything else. It makes it difficult to coerce as a community and rise up against aversion that we don't like. And you have the major fan base, you have the people that are casual fan base. The casual fan base love the prequel trilogies. The hardcore fan base love the prequel trilogies up to a certain point. I consider myself a hardcore fan base, but at the same time, I don't like all the romance in episode 2. Yes, I respect why they had to input all that, because it explains how Anakin fell in love with Padme, why he turned to Darth Vader, why he has 2 children in the regular trilogy that he never even knew about in the first place, and why he does things that he needs to get done to be redeemed in the final film. Darth Vader wasn't fighting 100% against Luke because he was trying to put on a show for his Emperor's final downfall. He didn't know he made a choice. There are plenty of choices that can turn you from light to dark and dark to light. Just like in the regular world, there are plenty of choices. There are plenty of jobs. There are plenty of choices that you can make to either make a lot of money or stay in food service and make as little money as possible. It is completely up to you and your spending habits of what you want to purchase or what you want to have as a respective community. Now, I, as a big Star Wars fan, and I love collecting the video games, I love collecting at least the Lego side of Star Wars toy collecting. I love all aspects of the Star Wars universe. I love the books. I love the movies. I have a whole bookshelf on my book of paperbacks and of hardcovers of Star Wars books, of science fiction books from the 80s and 70s. I even have the H.G. Wells collection, which includes The Time Machine, which another one of my most favorite movies was by John Zemeckis, which worked very closely with a good friend of George Lucas's, Steven Spielberg, in order to make his vision of creating a true time travel movie possible. It would not have been possible had it not been for the innovation of the franchises that came before it, such as Star Wars, and all those other great fictional works that laid the groundwork for the perfect time travel movie of the late 80s and early 90s. You don't get movies like that anymore because creators don't create anymore. They copy from things that are already there, but they copy them poorly. The reason why I don't see me going to go see the Pacific Rim is because every movie that I've seen based off of a video game has sucked. Every video game based off of a movie franchise or based off of a movie plot has sucked. But every video game that interlays a new storyline within that universe, that's a good game. Because just like when you're going to go see a movie for the first time, you don't know what you're going to go see until you've sat through it, seen it in the theater, and basically said, hey, that was a darn good movie. I can't believe that I went for years without seeing that movie. But at the same time, you have to realize that if you're going to go see a movie for the first time, you need to know what is entailed in that movie. So, let's say you see so when you buy when you go see uh, what's that movie? God, it's the Halloween film that has all those antics. It wasn't a critically acclaimed film. It was a cult fiction film now, but it interlaid the genre to allow the theaters to show it every year at around Halloween time. I can't remember the movie's name, but it had it was a teen party type Halloween thriller with Halloween action sequences and lots of party. You had fans that would sneak in bags with water guns, popcorn, everything that was done in the movies was acted out by the fans in the theaters. Star Wars, you have every highly grossed fiction movie has its own fan base, and the Star Wars fans are Star Wars fans because they like the lore. They like the creative aspect of how the Star Wars universe was created. They like the scores. They like the actual music that accompanies that scene, that creates the mood for the scene. They like the fact that they can dress up in their costumes and go see the movie with their children and with their grandchildren. They can do so much with so little, and the fact that when George Lucas was creating the films, he had specific groups of people that had to be a specific. So, like, for Return of the Jedi, he had to have a bunch of children and midgets, and I use that term lightly because smaller people in human language, in the U.S. language, is called a midget. I don't mean no disrespect for that, but he had to hire a bunch of 10-year-old kids and a bunch of really, really small people that were lower than 3 feet to fit into the Ewok costumes that he created. Nobody else could have played the Ewoks. He didn't care if they were African American, white, black, Hispanic, whatever. He just needed the right size of people for the characters that he needed to play, that he needed to have be played. And I like how every single movie that requires a specific type of person, that person goes on to greater fame because they were in a specific movie or they were in a specific type of thing. The guy that plays Griphook in The Sorcerer's Stone, and the guy which is also the same guy that plays Phileas Flitwick in all 7 films as well. It is really interesting to see him go from being an Ewok as a child to being one of the best well-known movie actors in Great Britain at the time of this recording. He has been in so many British films, either as a backdrop or as a person that is important in every movie. Well, he, as a 10-year-old kid, wrote a letter to George Lucas saying, "Hey, you remember me? I played Wicket in the last Star Wars movie. I'm 10 years old. I would love a complete set of the Kenners. action figure line for the Return of the Jedi thing. And of course, George Lucas responded back and said, "Of course, you can have. You were part of this movie as well. It's your party, just as it is ours, and we have shipped out the Kenner Star Wars line for the year of the Return of the Jedi." And that's what good fan service is all about. You can complain to George all you want that he didn't make the movies the way you had envisioned them previously. But isn't that what fan fiction is all about? You can envision whatever storyline for any movie, book, comic, anime franchise you want in fanfiction.com, and you don't have to go directly and complain to George or complain to news outlets, "Hey, I hated this movie. I would have wanted to see it differently." Create your creative vision on fanfiction. Create your creative vision in a YouTube short. It doesn't take a lot of knowledge. It doesn't take a lot of skills to do that. The thing is when you go to the news outlets, you say, or you have 30 fans on the nightly news saying, "Oh, I hate this film," at various, because when George Lucas releases a film, he monitors everything for the next couple weeks to see if he should make another one. That is exactly why we got the sequel of Empire Strikes Back from A New Hope, is he monitored it for 3 weeks. Science fiction films always do well in the first 2 weeks. Give it 3 or 4 weeks and we can discuss the next film in the franchise. I don't think he even knew what to do with all the new things that were appearing in his franchise at a time. He didn't expect the fan base to grow to such an enormous size to where it included the Generation X, it included the 90s, the 2000s. Every 10 years, it creates new generations of fans as the previous fans grow up and show the movies to their families, and the kids fall in love with it. And I only know a few 5 or 6-year-old kids that don't like it, and it's because they, for whatever reason, they're just young girls that don't like that it's all about action and violence, which, she doesn't like the original trilogy, and that was as far as she wanted to watch because she didn't enjoy it at all. And it was just the fact that you can have hardcore Star Wars fans that show it to their kids. The kids may not understand it or may not even enjoy it to start off with, but eventually they'll grow to appreciate it. Even if they're not a hardcore fan for the rest of their life like their parents are or their family members are, they can always learn to appreciate it as their parents do. They're just not as hardcore about it as their parents are, or their family members are, or their relatives are. And I think that when you're the best age to get introduced to the Star Wars franchise is age 5 or 6. I know that if I wasn't introduced in the theater to Star Wars at age 5 or 6, I probably wouldn't be as big a Star Wars fan as I am on this very day. I wouldn't have as many games as I have. I wouldn't be trying to collect a complete set of every Star Wars game for every console that I currently own, and then go out and collect more consoles for complete sets for every Star Wars game that has ever been made. If I were not such a big fan, I would not be so adamant that I would want to collect all that. I would not want to have to collect all the peripherals. I would not want to have to collect all the extra add-ons that you need to play the Star Wars games. So like the Nintendo 64 Star Wars games, they required the same things that Donkey Kong 64 and Legend of Zelda required because of the way that the games were manufactured. It required the expansion pack. It also required that if you played two-player co-op, you couldn't just, unlike the NES or SNES version, which, you know, you could have one-player version, or like you could have someone controlling the vehicles while you're controlling the weapons if you're doing two-player on the Super Nintendo. Unlike that, if you had the two-player co-op on the N64, it was, you had to have one player in one vehicle, another player in the other, and y'all both had the same mission. The mission was to get, if you were playing Starfighter, you would be attacking the Imperial ships. If you were part of if you were playing the Rebel squadron or whatever, you would be attacking the Imperial ships. You wouldn't be. And then Shadows of the Empire, it was a fighter game. It was a blaster game. It was a side scroller, and it was showing you how the Empire grew, and you would have to battle famous evildoers in the Empire. You would have to battle sometimes whole entire armies. You would have to crawl around military bases. It was very much like the Dark Forces game, which, going into the Dark Forces, the PC game has much better graphics than the PS1 game, but I prefer the PS1 game more so than the PC game because the PC that I originally played it on no longer is working, and I had to replace all the internals to rebuild my PC. And for early 90s and early 2000 PCs, for PC games like that, you had to go out, scrounge around your local video game store, buy another copy of the game or another copy of the disc to where you could reinstall it and then play it on your new hardware. So I have 2 copies of Lego Island 1 and Lego Island 2, all Lego games. I have 1 copy of all the Star Wars games, and I can't play the Star Wars games on my PC until I get another copy of the Star Wars games. And that's the unfortunate side effect of playing on PC, the Star Wars games, more so than playing on a console. Because console, you get stuck, you got your game facts to learn how to beat the level. You have your games individually that you can restart unless you're like Konami and you like to charge people to add a new save file, which I still don't agree with, but yeah, you should be able to. And of course, the thing about collecting Star Wars video games and Star Wars Lego sets, the video games are really only what? So if you get like Game Boy through PS3, depending on what game it is, you could be paying between $5 and $20, $25, $26, maybe $40 max for the games that you want for the Star Wars games for each individual game. It just depends on who's selling it to you, what they think the value is. Because I bought the 3 Star Wars games for PS1 that at my local movie trading company would have cost me $80, $90 just because of the nostalgia factor of it and what people value. Different companies value it at a different rate. I paid $25 for those 3 PS1 games at a gaming store that is further than I like to drive, but at the same time, it was the cheapest option for me to get the game that I needed, that I wanted to play again. Because all 3 of those PlayStation games also had computer ports that I played in the 90s. I had all those games for PS1 on the computer. I can't play the PS1 games that I had on the computer anymore. I have to play it on the PlayStation 3 or PlayStation 1 or whatever console allows backwards compatibility to PlayStation 1 games so that I can play what I want to play. Because I could pay $25 for a complete PlayStation 1 Star Wars collection, or I could pay $300 for all the Star Wars games I owned as a kid for PC, complete in box, or I could just pay for the games on the various consoles I own, and then whatever games only came out on the PC, purchase those at a later date for either a cheaper or more expensive price, so that I'm, first of all, maximize my gaming collection. Secondly, I don't have to keep repurchasing the games. Thirdly, the reason why I don't sell any games anymore is for that very same reason. I don't like paying more, either retail or higher, on games I had already owned. So that is one reason why I don't sell the games that I own currently. Another thing is find a reputable dealer in your local area that sells retro games or sells what you want to collect. For me, I like collecting Star Wars books, lore, comics. I like collecting Star Wars video games and older Star Wars Lego sets that I grew up with, and these Star Wars sets like the buildable figures of today, and basically movie sets. I don't care so much for the animated series sets as I do for the Ultimate Collector series sets, the main movie Star Wars sets, the vehicle sets for the main Star Wars movies, the army packs, all those things I like to collect because I like the movies of Star Wars. And I like collecting the older sets because they bring back childhood memories of what I had as a kid and what I always wanted as a kid. So there's that retrospective as well. You can go to your local used toy store. You can go to your local Goodwill. You can find your Star Wars video games. You can find your Star Wars figures. You can find your Star Wars costumes. You can find your Star Wars things because it has ingrained itself in pop culture. But at the same time, I'm not going to pay an arm and a leg for what I want, Sometimes I go into my local Goodwill and they want eBay prices for something that is worth, in my eyes, $2 to $3. It's not an authentic replica Star Wars Stormtrooper helmet that is typically $200, but they want $200 for it anyway, for just a little plastic kid helmet that fits around the kid's face. I don't agree with some of the business decisions to sell stuff at a higher price just because it's older. But I do respect that when the fandom really, really wants something and really wants to purchase something, that they'll spend whatever amount of money they want or that they need to have a complete collection of that specific item. This is me, Lego Brad 86, and I'm signing out. I just wanted to explain why fans are so vocal for the Star Wars franchise, I know I'm vocal when I want to be or when I don't agree with something, but then I also do my research as to why didn't I agree with this? Why was it in this movie? Why? Because there are things in movie making that, just, in my opinion, don't make sense. Disney, if you have any other answers to why the Candle Bite was in there and why you spent 50 to 60 minutes of a movie going through that scene when it should have only taken less than 30 minutes to go through that entire retrospect, I would love to hear your reply on why y'all spent 1/3 of the movie on Canto Bite when it should have only taken 30 minutes for them to break out of jail, get the codes, get on the supremacy, and try and lock down. Whereas it was an hour and a half segment of Canto Bite and the supremacy all in one line. And to me, it just didn't flow properly in the movie. And Disney, if you've got an explanation for that, I'm happy to listen to your explanation. It was explained well enough in the book as to what actually happened in a way that it made sense as to why it was in the movie. But everything that was in the movie, there were just specific things that didn't make sense in the movie when the movie was altered for on the cutting room floor. That was explained better in the books. But if I had a chance to go revisit the movie and do things, I would have done things a little bit differently. I would have done the Canto Bite section for 30 minutes because, to me, the Canto Bite section was just too long. Secondly, the thing is Star Wars, not Star Casino. I didn't need to see all the creatures gambling and trying to use R2-D2 as a slot machine or whatever the case may be in order to make money. I didn't need to see that part of it. Quite frankly, I really could care less about somebody using BB-8 as a slot machine or whatever, or trying to input money and BB-8 stealing it for the Resistance. I could care less about that. What I do care about is, why did y'all spend an hour and a half on that one particular area of the film where it should have only taken 30 minutes to take care of that particular area and move on to the next scene? You didn't have to have a 20-plus minute ride on a virtually extinct animal in the galaxy that is being used as slave labor in the races. You don't need a 30 to 45 minute scene explaining why animal cruelty is bad, not only in the Star Wars universe or in the actual world that we live in, because that's thrown into our faces every 15-20 minutes whenever we see a commercial. ASPCA throws it in to every 15-20 minutes. The organizations that give food to the hungry in poor nations, that's done every 15-20 minutes. I don't need to see an advert for ASPCA halfway into a Star Wars movie to break up the frames in between the two battle scenes. I don't need that shoved into my face. I understand where animal rights activists go on and on about animal rights and animal cruelty, but I also understand the other line of the argument where pet owners don't necessarily abuse their dogs. They try and train their dogs, and if their dog does something stupid, Of course they get angry. Of course, if I had a dog and I taught him to go outside to take a pee, and he peed all over the living room rug and carpet, and I had to spend $2,000 to $3,000 just to get it replaced because I'm moving out in 2 weeks. Of course I'd be pissed. Of course I'd be pissed. Of course, if I had the option and that if I really wanted to, and I was really that angry, I would beat the dog to a pulp. And I would bury it in the backyard, and no harm, no foul. As long as it's a graceful burial or whatever, I wouldn't have a problem with it. But, the thing is ASPCA spreading their wings too thin. They're trying to save the main course meals, the expensive meals in China, which are, unfortunately, dog meat, kangaroo meat, shark meat, things that we don't even think about eating in the United States, and things that you can't really control in other countries if you're a United States-based self-funding company that tries to save animals. You should only be worried about the animals in your region. You can't worry about world animal peace, and I don't feel like it should be shoved down my throat for 30 to 40 minutes in a Star Wars movie. I know that it's politically correct for the times, but at the same time, the politically correctness in the original Star Wars trilogy, the prequel trilogy, all subtle. I didn't have to understand the political humor until I was an adult, and I could understand those jokes. I still understood the premises of the movie as a child. I didn't have to be shoved 30 to 45 minutes of a scene that did not have any continuity in the overall film, showing me, oh, poor animals. It was like for the Hearts of the Angels commercials for the ASPCA. I don't care for those. I don't give money to the SPCA because what do those commercials make me do? They make me feel depressed for the creatures that are being abused. I don't need to feel depressed when I go to a movie theater. That's why I like action movies. That's why I like action romance. That's why I like anything that doesn't have to do with just one genre of movie. It's not because I'm biased. It's not because I'm picky. It's because if I go to a movie theater, I want to escape the real world. I don't want to be reminded of what's on the news every single day. The next murder victim on the news every single day. This person was arrested for beating his dog to a pulp. That kind of thing. These people were swatted because they were playing a video game and a fellow player got angry and found out their home address and basically called the police and wanted them killed for no reason. It's like, why? I don't play a lot of multiplayer games because I get aggravated really easily, and I don't want to have a reason to have to swat people or call somebody up and say, hey, I hate your guts, I'm coming after you, and then have them have to have police protection for 5 or 6 months, even if I don't go through with the threat that could land me into jail. That's why I don't play a lot of multiplayer games. If I play multiplayer, I expect whoever I'm playing to be respectful. Yes, I may not like if I play multiplayer in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game, Legacy of the Duelist, like I have been. Yes, I may not like what my players come up with as his card combos. Yes, I don't understand the meta of today. But even then, it's more important to have fun with the game. And I, on the other hand, don't like games that require, you need to have multiplayer in order to get your full fulfillment without maybe a training level or even a level where you can start to get good at the game before you're thrust into a battle scene. That's part of the reason why even if I collect every Star Wars game, I'm not going to collect Battlefront 1. I don't like having to pay for characters. Luckily, Battlefront 2 has reprimanded that in a recent update patch, which allows me to unlock the Darth Vader or whatever characters I wanted without having to pay, and a little bit sooner through gameplay without having to worry about playing the game. Because the level pack for the Battlefront 2, the campaign, depending on if you're speedrunning it or not, it can take between 8 to 12 hours to complete the main course of gameplay. That's not including the DLC for additional level packs that lead up to The Force Awakens or any of that. That is just the base gameplay. That is for 12 hours, 10 to 12 hours, you could complete the entire Star Wars Battlefront game in single mode player. Now, if I were to complete the single mode player and want to unlock Darth Vader initially, I would have had to have paid either 25,000 points for Darth Vader, which is about 2,000 hours to unlock a character in-game with the in-game currency, or I could have paid $25 for a code card that would have allowed me to unlock Darth Vader initially in gameplay. And of course, those code cards to unlock DLC to unlock characters that are difficult to unlock were actually given away when you pre-ordered the game at GameStop. Have I gotten the game? No. The reason why I haven't gotten the game is because I was waiting for the update that allowed once you complete. So now the way it works is you don't have to pay for additional content. You don't have to pay for cosmetics, or you just have to pay for the cosmetics of your character. So say you want white Darth Vader instead of black suit Darth Vader, you would pay for $2.99 for the cosmetic look of the variant of you that you would want for your Darth Vader to make it look different from any other Darth Vader in the game. But I can understand paying for cosmetics for a character that you love and adore and that you want. What I can't understand is having to pay full price for a game, pay $25 for a character, and then pay $3 to $4 for whatever aesthetics you want, a color creator for your character or whatnot. That is unacceptable when I purchase the game. When I purchase a game, I expect it to be complete. If they need to add DLC content, say similar to the LEGO games, those DLC content constitute to either a new movie or a new comic book that came out in the case of LEGO Marvel Superheroes and Superheroes 2, or additional characters that didn't come out with the original game but were added in based off of fan responses to the game. That is a methodology that is why TT Games watches the gameplay footage for all their games that are posted on YouTube, because that way they can get, fans want this character, I can add it to this DLC pack, I can do it this in the next game, I can do whatever to make the games better. That is why TT Games included a question at the beginning of every game before you even start the game. Do you want TT Games to be able to watch your gameplay footage, and if you have any errors, it helps increase the potential of the gameplay as a whole. And that I really enjoy in a company, because it shows that they're not all about money, but they're also about improving their gameplay experience and the way that they see the gameplay experience as a whole. And I think that's the way that gaming companies have to evolve back into is creating wonderful and great, wholesome games that you and I can play, that you don't have to have a bunch of free-to-play games and have to pay a whole bunch of money to get additional content or additional items that are required to complete levels or tasks. Now, for all the PlayStation games that are free to play, you have the option of either paying for the packs or playing it for free and still earning the loot that you need to increase your levels, just at a slower pace. You know, it's not any more different of a video game. It just takes twice as long, should you not buy the packs, than it does to just buy the packs. But it's completely up to the person. They get the rewards that the packs would give either way. It's just you can either pay for additional content packs to get special items or to get what you need to increase your funds so that you can evolve faster and faster in each gameplay area. And or in the case of EA, if they were going to include microtransactions, create the base game, for $25. Doesn't have to be anything great. If you're going to do microtransactions, create the base game with single player mode. Have the fans, should they want to play multiplayer mode, purchase the multiplayer. And then if you need to, you can add special skins, special things that can only be bought via microtransactions, but don't expect a $60 game that includes microtransactions to be business viable and get you those microtransactions. The reason why microtransactions are so popular on phones is because, first of all, most of the games that require microtransactions are free to play. You have the choice to play it for free and get either half level packs, or you can pay less than $5 to get all the level packs and possibly more additional content. And if you wanted to pay for money or whatever, or in-game currency, you would pay within $2 to $10 depending on how much you want. You're not paying a premium of a $60 game, and then on top of that, the news outlet said that for Star Wars Battlefront 2, for all the DLC add-on payable content, it would cost, if you wanted everything that the game had to offer immediately when you started, it would cost, wait for it, $28,000 for everything in the game. And I'm like, okay, so you're charging us $60. It costs $28,000 for everything in the game if you want it right away. Why am I playing this game? You know, I can understand, you know, free-to-play games charging $4 to $5 for additional content. That is at least understandable because it's free to play. You have your choice to either play it for free, maybe at a slower pace than everybody else, or you have a choice to play an exuberant amount of money to get what you need, but it starts off free. You don't have to pay for anything if you don't want to. And that's the thing, EA. If you're going to do microtransactions, make the game free to play or cheap enough to where we can afford some of the microtransactions to start off with. And if we like the microtransactions that we're getting for the game, fans will speak out in approval for microtransactions. The way you went about it is you're like, oh, by the way, we'll put out a $60 game that's not fully completed yet, and we'll release it, and we'll charge a lot of money if you want it. If you want game characters earlier to be unlocked earlier, then you can currently unlock them. You know, it's like, guys, if I wanted to buy an incomplete game that I had to wait, because I can only play an hour at a time on first-person shooters, whether they're Star Wars or not, because even in the Star Wars franchise, if I get too engrossed into the first-person shooter aspect, my mind is not there for the rest of the day. I have to be concentrated on what I'm doing on my YouTube videos. So I can only play first-person shooters like the Star Wars first-person shooters for an hour a day. It's nothing against y'all. It's nothing against EA as a whole. But the way that EA had the unlockables, it would take me playing an hour a day 25 years to unlock all the characters in Star Wars Battlefront. Because not only did you have to play 2,000 hours to unlock up to 3 characters, but then you had to purchase it with in-game currency. The in-game currency are the hours you played. You use up all your in-game currency, you're starting from scratch. You unlock Darth Vader, but you still have to re-unlock. You unlocked and purchased Darth Vader. Now you got re-unlock and purchase the other 2 characters that you wanted that cost 2,000 hours. Now that's for one character that I would have to work and play that game 25 years every day of the week. 25 years. 1 hour a day to unlock my favorite character in the Star Wars franchise. That is not including all the other characters you have to unlock and purchase with the in-game currency before you can even have enough play time to unlock Darth Vader. That doesn't include the other 25 characters that you have to unlock and purchase before you can even start working up that ladder to gain Darth Vader. I don't want to pay for all the characters. If it was a free to play and I wanted all the characters, yeah, I would be willing to pay for it. But here's where you went wrong. You charge too much for the game initially because it costs too much in backlog. You then alert the news outlets, or the news outlets are alerted same day that, and a week prior that, oh, there's going to be microtransactions. Fans go up in an outcry, and you don't even make ends meet for what you paid to develop the game because you chose the wrong side of the coin. I can understand a $30 Star Wars game having microtransactions on a platform such as PS4, Xbox One, and Switch. I cannot allow a $60 Star Wars game to have microtransactions. That is something I never grew up with. I grew up with complete games. If the games weren't completely tested and weren't up to quality standards, you didn't have to buy it. You had the option to buy it or not to buy it. EA's grown into such a popular franchise that they think that they can't be hurt by anything that the video game market or video game fan base could throw at them. They made great Harry Potter games. I've got all the Harry Potter games because those were complete games. Those were complete games that I could play out front and without having to worry about paying to unlock extra characters or whatnot. The Harry Potter games, you play as 3 characters. Well, the first 2 games you played as only Harry. The last, so 3 through 7, part 2, you could play as 3 characters: Harry, Ron, or Hermione. Only characters you could play as. It was simple. It was very streamlined, and it told the stories. It told the book stories in a way that was understandable to gamers of the time that didn't have time or didn't want to watch the movies, or thought the movies were crap but wanted to try out the video games. The video games were more appealing, or didn't have time to read the books to go in depth. The video games went just as in depth as the books without all that crappy, we're going to take this out, we're going to take this out, we're going to take this out that the movies did. The video games had Peeves, the Poltergeist. Movies did not. Books had Peeves, the Poltergeist, causing all sorts of mayhem around Hogwarts. You need Peeves in a localized Harry Potter game, Harry Potter movie, and so on and so forth. Hogwarts is not the same without Peeves. That is the good things that the video game franchise came up with, because they understood where the books stood and why Peeves was in the books, why Peeves and why some of the minor characters were in there. Even if it was just to bug you or teach you a mechanic of the game, you were proud to play that EA game because you knew it was a high quality product. EA, you have lost your way. Just like the Star Wars franchise has lost its way since it had been sold to Disney. If you lose your way, find your way again. Learn from the mistakes that previous iterations had made and fulfill the destiny that is made for you. EA, the reason why Disney is trying to revoke your contract for Star Wars games is not because you're a bad company, not because you make bad games. You made wonderful Star Wars games in the past. You made wonderful, great games in the past. The problem that Disney has with you and your microtransactions is if you're going to charge microtransactions, if you were going to charge microtransactions, Disney would want some of that cut. The way your contract's made with Disney and the Star Wars franchise in general is they get a cut of the base game. If you were going to charge microtransactions, you should have let Disney know in the actual contract making process that you had to renew with Disney and not George Lucas in order to get the game made. Because I can assure you, Disney's a money-making machine. If you were going to charge microtransactions and did not include them in some of the profits of the microtransactions, your license would have been revoked anyway. I mean, because that was not part of the deal that you made with Disney. That's it for this Star Wars video. I wanted to share with you what my history is in Star Wars, why Star Wars and video games and movies has basically gone down the tube, and why it is important for the history of the world and how it changed movie history in general. This is Lego Brad 86 signing out, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.